Baseball is life. I love it more than my wife. To hear the umpire holler calls of inside strikes and outside balls. Hot dogs, peanuts, and buttered corn. Still fans of the game in New York torn. It's now pinstripes or orange and blue. Farewell Giants. Good riddance, bums. We be through. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This past week we were doing the play-by-play for Senior Day for the Park Ridge baseball team, and I hope you watch it. The kids gave their best. Unfortunately, they came up on the losing end, but they went out as winners because the seniors and the rest of the players on Park Ridge really showed their best and really displayed sportsmanship and just great team play. And with that, I want to do a poem that I was aware of that I have done, but I said, you know what? Howard and I were thinking of a topic this week, and I said, why not? Because I do love using particularly baseball with literature and combining the two. And of course, Ogden Nash wrote for Sport Magazine back in 1949, a tribute to baseball's yesterday's heroes. And it's called Lineup for Yesterday, an ABC of Baseball Immortals. And it's really a nice trip down memory lane for some of the great players at not just the turn of the century, but in the 40s and 50s as well. And just a little very brief background, because I am, even though I've read some Ogden Nash, and most of you probably have somewhere along the line, your sophomore or your junior American Lit classes, I've probably read some Ogden Nash. His poetry is fun. I guess people might call it simple. It's not deep philosophical meaning like maybe of an American author, let's say of a Robert Frost. Not to say that there isn't meaning and theme and a message underneath it all, but it's very witty, it's whimsical, and probably many might equate it to when they were little kids reading Dr. Seuss books. There is many rhymes, many puns, many play on words, which I really appreciate. And it leaves you always in a good humor. So I figured I would read that because baseball for me leaves me 99% of the time in a good humor, unless I lose a frustrating game that I know I kicked away or booted away or struck out away the game, and I blame me. But anyway, the name of the poem is called Lineup for Yesterday, and I do have this arranged. Actually, Ogden Nash, just a little other background, he was and I didn't know this, a huge fanatical sports fan, particularly of the Baltimore Colts. He was actually born in New York and did eventually settle in Baltimore for most of his life and was a huge Colt fan. Now, I was just thinking about this. There was a Life cover with, it's entitled My Colts, Verses and Reverses by Ogden Nash. This is from December 1968. And if anybody remembers, Sports Illustrated, I think they were originally owned by Time. Then Time Life got together. And anybody who was a Sports Illustrated magazine aficionado knows about the Sports Illustrated curse, which actually isn't true. But for the fun of it, it's always been the feeling that if you made the cover of Sports Illustrated, you were doomed either the next week or your season was after that in the tank. And this happens to be one of the great seasons in Baltimore Colt history, when they would finish the NFL season 13-1 and meet, unfortunately, and then just bulldoze the Cleveland Browns in the NFL championship game, and then go on and play the Jets in the 68-69 Super Bowl. That's number 3. And for the Colts, I guess making the cover of Life magazine was as good as making the cover of Sports Illustrated, because it was doom and gloom for the Colts that year. I'm not laughing at you Colt fans. I'm just laughing about how, it's amazing how these kind of myths, or making the curse of the Sports Illustrated cover really does branch out into other magazines that company, the owner of Sports Illustrated, would eventually acquire. And this, of course, is a picture of Ogden Nash. He used to do, I was reading about this. Now, listen, I don't know. I'm not a be-all and end-all expert. It's just what I gathered. And I didn't actually realize this, but he's a bit of a celebrity. Made many TV appearances. Was a huge sports fan, like I said, particularly of the Colts, and does this poem on baseball. So he was kind of a guy that I would love to introduce again into English Lit, because I think there would be a connection with your sports fan kids. And hey, poetry, it's not bad. You can put up with it if it's about sports. So without further ado, I'm going to read the poem, and I think I have all of the people mentioned here. Some are Hall of Fame players that, not just Hall of Famers, but you're arguing whether they belong in the Mount Rushmore. And then there are other players that either they had great nicknames or they had a poem written about them. Tinker's Evers, The Chance, which I won't go into. I think by the time I read this poem, you'll be done with me and poetry reciting. And then there are others like a Bobo Newsom, who's mentioned, who had an interesting career, but nonetheless is not with the Titans, I would argue, of baseball, the Ruths, the Geurigs, the Cy Youngs, etc. So without further ado, as I've just said, we're going to start off and try to do this in order. It's called Lineup for Yesterday, an ABC of baseball Immortals. This first appeared, I do believe, in Sport Magazine, January of 1949. A is for Alex, the great Alexander. More goose eggs he pitched than a popular gander. B is for Bresnahan, back of the plate. The Cubs were his love, and McGraw his hate. C is for Cobb, who grew spikes and not corn, and made all the basemen wish they weren't born. D is for Dean, the grammatical diz, when they asked, "Who's the tops?" said correctly, "I is." E is for Evers, his jaw in advance, never afraid to tinker with chance. F is for Fordham and Frankie and Frisch. I wish he were back with the Giants, I wish. G is for Gehrig, the pride of the stadium, his record pure gold, his courage pure radium. H is for Hornsby. When pitching to Raj, the pitcher would pitch, then the pitcher would dodge. I is for me, not a hard-hitting man, but an outstanding all-time incurable fan. J is for Johnson, the big train in his prime, was so fast he could throw 3 strikes at a time. K is for Keeler, as fresh as green paint, the fastest and mostest to hit where they ain't. L is for Lajoie, whom Clevelanders love, Napoleon himself with glue in his glove. M is for Matty, who carried a charm in the form of an extra brain in his arm. N is for Newsom, Bobo's favorite kin. You asked how he's here, he talked himself in. O is for Ott, of the restless right foot. When he leaned on the pellet stayed put. P is for Plank, the arm of the A's. When he tangled with Matty, games lasted for days. Q is for Don Quixote, Cornelius Mack. Neither Yankees nor years can halt his attack. R is for Ruth. To tell you the truth, there's just no more to be said. Just R is for Ruth. S is for Speaker, swift center fielder tender. When the ball saw him coming, it yelled, "I surrender!" T is for Terry, the giant from Memphis, whose 401 average you can't overemphasize. U would be Ubble if Carl were a Cockney. We say Ubble in baseball like football and Rockney. V is for Vance, the Dodgers' very own Dazzy, None of his rivals could throw as fast as he. W is for Wagner. The bow-legged beauty, short was closed to all traffic with Honus on duty. X is the first of two X's in Fox, who was right behind Ruth with his powerful socks. Y is for Young, the magnificent sigh. People battled against him, but I never knew why. Z is for Zenith, the summit of fame. These men are up there. These men are the game. Now, I am just going to do it this way. I have 24 players. I'll mention them. I won't do it necessarily in order because I kind of messed up the pages of the assembly, but I'll start with Grover Cleveland Alexander, who happens to be one of my favorite pitchers of all time. Now, I'm not a big pitching guy. I don't know their stats as well as I do, let's say, Johnny Bench, the catchers, or the first baseman. And I think it's just natural that you probably know hitters' marks more than you do pitchers. But nonetheless, Grover Cleveland Alexander was 373 and 208. And at one point, with a 2.56 ERA lifetime, at one point, he won 30 games 3 years in a row and compiled a record of 94 and 35. 5 times out of 6 years, he was the ERA leader. And get this, his ERA was no higher than 1.91 during those years, and it got to a low of 1.22. Now, we talk and we marvel over Bob Gibson's 1968 1.12, but Gibson was a great pitcher, 2.52, I think, ERA lifetime, but he was never able to assemble. Now, the game is different. We were talking about that last week with Ted Williams and Aaron Judge. Game is totally different today than it was then. But putting it in context, I didn't see too many other guys who were pitching in the major leagues at the time compile those stats that Grover Cleveland Alexander did. So it just goes to show you not just the toughness of the player, but also the greatness and the great talent that he had in his person. And, of course, Grover Cleveland is best known for that 1926 Game 7 World Series where it comes out supposedly under the weather and beats the Yankees in a Game 7 in the World Series 1926. Let me just, you know what? I may just do this. Give you the play-by-play of when he came in. Because he strikes out Lazzari with the bases loaded after Lazzari, I think, ripped a ball down the right field line that could have been a grand slam. Alexander gets the save. Did not know this. Jesse Haynes got the win. But here's how it happened. 6 2/3 innings, Jesse Haynes comes in. And Alexander comes in, throws 2 1/3 innings of scoreless relief, gets a strikeout and a walk. Had a 1.33 ERA for the series. To start it, Earl Coombs had a single off Jesse Haynes in the bottom of the 7th. Mark Koenig had a bunt ground out, a sacrifice. Then there was an intentional walk, another ground out. Then a walk to Bob Musial. Haynes is taken out. Alexander is inserted, and Lazzari strikes out swinging. After Lazzari had scared everybody on the St. Louis bench and drilled a ball down the right field line, almost for a grand slam home run. Then he pitches the 8th, up and down, ground out, foul, pop fly. He gets Dugan, or Joe Dugan, Pat Collins, and Herb Pennock, the pitcher. And then in the 9th inning, with the Cardinals up 3-2, Earl Coombs grounds out. Mark Koenig grounds out. Both plays 3rd to 1st. Babe Ruth walked. And with Bob Musial at the plate, Babe Ruth is caught stealing at second base. Now, people like me always assumed it was Gehrig, but it was Bob Musial who was at the plate when, of course, Babe Ruth made the final out of the 26 World Series. Interesting. But Alexander, great picture of him. He looks like an old-time pitcher, doesn't he, with the hat slightly askewed and bent and all the rest of it. Roger Bresnahan, I think he was the one who was nicknamed or gave the nickname to the catcher's equipment as the tools of ignorance. He is in the Hall of Fame, had a lifetime batting average of .279. He was a big stolen base guy, 212 steals lifetime, which I am sure, but I'm not going to say right now as I'm adamant about this. I am sure that if he isn't the top guy, he's one of the top 3 in stolen bases among catchers. And he led the league in hit by pitches one year with 15. In the same year, he led with walks, 83. He was on a World Series winner, and his contribution, and probably why Ogden Nash used him, is that he was probably the model of which all catchers were based. And with the nickname of the tools of ignorance, he's got a lot of hype there going too, let's be honest. Ty Cobb, I mean, what can you say about Cobb? Cobb, 366 lifetime. Do you realize a 366 lifetime is that's better than 4 hits and 11 at-bats? Not only that, 11 times he scored 100 runs or more. He was a 13-time batting champ, 12 years in a row. His lowest batting average to win the title was .324. His highest was .419. And he is a Triple Crown winner with 9 home runs, 107 RBIs, and a .377 batting average. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, where do you begin to talk about him? He was just an incredible player. I know off the field and on the field, he was obviously controversial. Nonetheless, let's just talk about his talent. He's just a great player. And he changed the way the game is played today. I'm just going to give you a listing of Cobb. He led the league. Well, I'll even do this. He led the league in WAR 5 times. He led the league in runs, like I said, 11 times. And not only that, he led the league in hits 8 times, led the league in doubles 3, led the league in triples 4 times, led the league in home runs once. He was an MVP in the year that he won. No, he doesn't win. They didn't have a MVP, I believe, in 19. No, they should have. Didn't win the MVP in 1909. He wins it in 1911 with 8 homers, 127 RBIs, 83 steals, and a .419 batting average. He, however, plays in the postseason and had his difficulties. He only hit .262. I mean, most guys would give an arm and a leg to hit .262 in postseason. But he did struggle in 2 of the 3, and they were all losses. Detroit lost to Chicago twice, lost to them 8 of 9 times, and then Detroit was beaten by Pittsburgh in 7 games. Unfortunately, in the 5-game loss to the Cubs, that happened to be his best series. He hit close to his career average. He hit .368 with 7 hits and 19 at-bats, 3 runs, a double, 4 RBIs, and 2 steals to go with a walk. Ty Cobb. It is amazing. He only played in 3 World Series. The guy was gifted. I know maybe he's regarded as not one of the greatest of all teammates, but nonetheless, you have to pay him his due and say, great player. Dizzy Dean, the next guy. And I did find some cards. And of course, obviously, this is a cigar or cigarette package that they got, or pipe tobacco. They used to have the cards in there. And of course, the most famous I do have of Hannes Wagner. I'm going to show you that. Jerome Dizzy Dean was a character. A lifetime 150-83 record, a 644 winning percentage, of course. He is a Hall of Famer. His career is definitely derailed by an injury he suffered in the All-Star game, then tried to come back too soon, and then overcompensated, and then hurt his arm, and was never the same. But while he was on fire, he's the last National Leaguer to win 30 games in a season. They beat the Tigers, and Dizzy Dean that year, all he did was win 30 games. He and his brother Paul, like he used to say. Paul won 19. Together, they won 49 and 18. Dizzy, just to give you an idea how dominant he was. Actually, you're going to laugh when I say this, and I don't mean this to demean Dizzy. He only had a 2.66 ERA, and he lost 7 times. He was 30-7 that year, started 33 games, was in 50. So he came in 17 times in relief and saved 7 games, along with getting 7 shutouts and throwing 24 complete games. Led the league in strikeouts with 195. He was the MVP that year. He had an 8.9 WAR, and I'm just leaving it in there. Although sometimes they do the WAR, and I don't know how Baseball Reference does this. His WAR actually, I think, is just based on pitching statistics. When they give it here, it was 9.5. The runner-up was Paul Wainer that year, who hit 362 for the Pirates with 8 homers, 68 RBIs. And JoJo Moore of the Giants was third. He had 5 homers, 31 RBIs, 331 batting average. But clearly, Dizzy Dean was the most dominant pitcher and the most dominant player in 1934 for the St. Louis Cardinals. And like I said, he unfortunately wrecked his arm after that. The next player is Johnny Evers, of course, of the famed Tinkers to Evers Chance, the double play combination that was immortalized in a poem by Franklin Pierce Adams. Evers, of course, played for a number of teams, including the World Championship Cubs of the early 1900s. He actually was an MVP with the 1914 Boston Braves, as they were the hitless wonders. They went on and won a World Series. In fact, remember a couple of issues ago or episodes ago, I mentioned that even that Boston Braves team that were called the hitless wonders because of their anemic offense still managed to have guys, their lowest batting average of the starting 9 was 276 or 279, unlike many of the teams today, which are under the Mendoza line, and you're starting currently about 30 regulars under 200. But anyway, Evers batted 279 for his lifetime. The year that he won the MVP, he beat out Rabbit Marionville, the shortstop for the Cardinals. He hit 279 with 81 runs scored, 1 home run, 40 RBIs. Frankie Frisch. Now, I didn't do a lot of exploring with Frankie Frisch. He was known as the Fordham Flash. Obviously went and was a Ram with Fordham. Hit 316 lifetime. What stands out for me with him is 2,880 hits. And 10 times, though, this is what really stands out, he was a top 20 MVP. And including in that was his MVP award in 1931 when he had 4 homers, 82 RBIs, and 311. And, of course, the Iron Horse. One thing I will say, many of these guys have some great nicknames, and that's going to be another show. Today's are very bland, very stark, very boring. No imagination whatsoever in today's nicknames. Gehrig, so much can be said about him. We've done or spent a number of episodes on Gehrig. 493 home runs. I would imagine that had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It always gives me a tongue twister. Had Gehrig been healthy, probably would have played another 2-3 years and certainly would have hit over 500 home runs. And, of course, the Raja, Rogers Hornsby, who I mentioned last week in the Ted Williams tribute, was, if not, probably Williams's all-time hitter. And I'm almost guessing it's because he met, talked in detail with Rogers Hornsby about hitting. But Hornsby takes a backseat to nobody. He had a lifetime 358 batting average with 301 home runs. Remember, he played the infield, second base. His Triple Crown year, 1922, 42 home runs. So he had pop in his bat, 152 RBIs. So he was driving in runs, probably hitting third or fourth in the lineup. And a really low batting average for him, 401. Why do I say that? Well, he was a 7-time batting champ, including 6 titles in a row. That in itself is kind of remarkable because of all the things that have to go right. First of all, you got to stay healthy. Second, you have to meet the minimum. I think it's 502 plate appearances. Third, you just got to be on your game every game for 6 straight years to be able to do that. And even though luck does play a role, I think it shows that you're just a fantastic, one-of-a-kind, maybe once-in-a-generation type of hitter. As I maintained earlier, yes, there may be some advantages to the old-time players. They certainly weren't playing in 4 time zones. They didn't have coast-to-coast travel. They weren't playing night baseball. They didn't have the diverse population now playing in baseball with players from all over Asia, even Europe, sometimes Australia, South America, Central America, and of course North America, Canada, United States, and of course of all ethnicities and races. Yes, I get all that. But it's not like everyone was hitting 450 and popping 50 home runs in the lineup. And not everyone was winning 35 games with an ERA not just under 2, but under 1.5. So these guys were great in their time. Many of them could be great in this time. I think that's really fair to say. Hornsby is probably one of them. Now, I know that Hornsby didn't have the greatest of personalities, which is why he was traded, and he was not one of the great managers of his day. But nevertheless, he hit in 1922. He had an on-base percentage of .459, courtesy, and this is what I was talking about, 250 hits and 65 base on balls. Those 6 in a row batting championships, he hit no lower during those championship runs than 370 with a high of 424. Not 401, 424. Walter Johnson, big train, 417 wins. Now, I think, and I'm going to have to look this up, maybe Saber, the investigators, the great researchers for Society of American Baseball Research, probably they scoured the box scores and maybe they came up with another win. I always thought Walter Johnson had 416 wins. Now, who's going to dicker over a win? Whether it's 416 or 417, he had a ton. And he was he only had 279 losses. So if I just make that, he's 138 games over 500. You can't get guys today with 138 decisions or 138 games in their career, let alone having 696 decisions. 696 decisions in his lifetime. That's basically 3 baseball seasons. And he had an ERA of 2.17. And of course, Walter Johnson does win a championship at least once. He was another guy that really toiled with terrible National Washington Senators team, but at least he did get one championship over the Pirates. Wee Willie Keeler, ready for this? 8 times. Look how he choked up on the bat. 8 times he had over 200 hits. He had a lifetime 341 batting average. He scored 140 runs one year. And of course, he had the great nickname, because it was the quote that was attached to him, of hit him where they ain't Keeler, because he said, what's your success? What's your secret to having such a high batting average and collecting so many hits? And basically he said, I hit them where they ain't. And it's so true. I mean, if they're giving, and this is what I guess my big frustration with today's players with the shifts, something I'm for all the way, not limits on the shift. If a team wants to shift all the way over, they can. They just can't go into the foul lines. It's a baseball rule. But if they want to put 9 guys or 8 guys down the line, 7 guys down the line, Then let them. Who cares? Now it's up. It behooves the guy at the plate to either lay the bunt down or just chop the ball and get a base hit and do that until they come around to their senses maybe and play the guy honestly. Imagine Ty Cobb or Wee Willie Keeler or Pete Rose or Tony Gwynn playing against it. Or, Ted Williams was playing against today's shifts. He'd still be hitting 344. He'd probably be eating up all the pitchers, though. Keeler, 8 times 200 hits in the season. He had a high of 424. Nap Lajoie. Now, I'm very proud. I can actually pronounce that. No tongue twister there for me. My brothers taught me how to pronounce that word, his name correctly. He was the Triple Crown winner in 1901, 11 times. He hit 350 or higher. He was a 4-time batting champ. And I know this, and I'm going to do the research on this. I know that Sporting News had a story years ago. It was very interesting. And they went through all the box scores. Again, a researcher went through the box scores and discovered that I think Lajoie had an extra hit that he wasn't accorded or given. And baseball changed or revamped his statistics, which led, I think, to him being the batting leader for that year. And there was big controversy with the MVP between Nat and Ty Cobb. And as I'm telling this, I know I have it all wrong, but I promise I'll do a show on that. I think I have bits and pieces of it right, but there was a huge controversy either about the batting title and or the MVP in one year between Cobb and Lajoie. And then you have Christy Matheson, 373 wins. Ready for this? Great pitcher all time. And he is 41 games behind Walter Johnson. Incredible. 373. Now, what makes him interesting, of course, I remember reading a book by him about pitching in a pinch. And it was really the science and the art of pitching. And I wish, and I guess I'm getting cantankerous in my old age, I wish many of today's pitchers and pitching coaches would start to reread that. Kind of like what I said about Jim Rice going up to Ted Williams and asking him about hitting. He said, "Did you read my book?" "Well, until you read my book, I'm not going to talk to you." And then Rice not only read it, but kept it by his bedside, always kept referring to it during his hitting days with the Red Sox. Anyway, Pitching in a Pinch was a very interesting book about not just the science, but the intellectual side of pitching, not just throwing a baseball. He was a Triple Crown winner for pitching, 37-11 in 1908, 1.43 ERA, 390 innings pitched, 34 complete games. Now, this is interesting, the Triple Crown, only because I remember when Carlton won it in 72, it was a big deal, but the Triple Crown for pitching is not as big a deal as it is for hitting. And I think probably because some people think it's wins, ERA, and innings pitched. Others might think it's wins, ERA, and strikeouts. I would consider that it's wins, ERA, and innings pitched because obviously innings pitched, you're going to have more of those than you are strikeouts. Now, interesting guy, and as I'm redoing this, Bobo Newsom was an interesting character. 211 and 222. This guy probably kept the post office in business with all of his moves and forwarding at addresses. Probably drove, mailmen crazy with all of his different places of venue. He got traded to the Yankees. He went to the St. Louis Browns, was traded by the Browns to Washington, went back to the Browns, went to Boston, all over. He did finally win a championship with the Yankees. And he finished 211 and 222. He lost 20 games 3 times, but he won 20 games 3 times. He's an interesting guy. And I'm going to do further research on him in a later show. He was a 3-time All-Star as well. Mel Ott, 511 home runs. 8 years he hit over 100 RBIs, or averaged 100 RBIs. Eddie Plank, 8 times he won 20 games. 326, 194. Connie Mack, 3,731 wins, 3,948 losses. Managed, ready for this, 56, probably 57 years. But in that time, when he had great players, he managed great. When he had terrible players, he managed poorly. 5 times he won 100 games or more. 10 times he lost 100 games or more. But he did win 9 pennants and 5 World Series. Next guy. Tris Speaker, Babe Ruth. I'm moving on Babe Ruth, not because I don't want to wax poetic about him, but I have done simply the greatest player of all time. He will always be the greatest player of all time. There was no player like Babe Ruth. He is the game. He was the game. He will forever be the game. Enough said. Tris Speaker, 7 times the doubles leader. He averaged during those times no lower than 53 doubles a year, and he had a high of 59, 5 times 50 or more. He was an MVP in 1912. 53 doubles, 10 triples, 10 homers, 90 RBIs, only 383. Are you kidding me, Tris Speaker? And was a great defensive outfielder, probably regarded as arguably the greatest defensive outfield up until maybe Willie Mays. I know there were some guys other than that in the National League, but you could probably argue he was seen as the greatest center fielder of his time, certainly in the American League. Just a great ball player. Bill Terry, last National Leaguer to hit 400. He hit 401, 23, 129. He finished 3 times the number 3 guy in the MVP. Interesting. Bill Terry. Next, Carl Hubbell. But it's really Carl Hubbell. Brilliant by Ogden Nash, having some fun, and he was known for that, changing words or changing the letters in the words to make it fit. You can only do that if you know what you're doing as a poet, and he did. Carl Hubbell, in the poem, 5 times 20 wins, 2-time MVP. Did not know that. I'm really impressed with the number of MVPs that were pitchers. We can get into that segment a little later to debate whether pitchers should just be required to win the MVP, the Cy Young, or should they be qualified to win the MVP. I think they should be entitled to win both, because there are definitely years where even though the guy plays 40 games, he's the MVP. Next, Dazzy Vance, another interesting pitcher, 197 and 140, but over a 2-year period, he was 50 and 15 in 1924 and 1925. 3 times he won 20 games. He was the MVP in 24. His best year, I would consider, 28 and 6, 2.16 ERA. And he was a 7-time strikeout leader. Hannes Wagner, arguably the greatest Pittsburgh Pirate, maybe up until Clemente. That would be a good argument. Wagner was just an unbelievable player, right from Western Pennsylvania. Wagner, I did get the picture that he's famous for, or the most famous card, I think, at one point, because he did not smoke or chew tobacco, and yet his picture, and he did not like it at all, appeared in a tobacco, in boxes of tobacco. And for that reason, I think they were taken off the shelves. You can talk to the baseball card experts. I love baseball cards. I never got into the expertise of it, but it is interesting. And now there was, 8 or 10 that were left that were in mint condition, but they're worth millions of dollars. But Wagner was a great player. Jimmy Fox, double X. And I loved how Ogden Nash did that also. I love the fact that he was double X. I wonder if he had been a pitcher, would he have done this? Jimmy Fox, XXX. It would have been interesting. 534 home runs, 3-time MVP. I would say his 2 greatest seasons. He was called the Beast, double X, but I love the name Beast. And I did have a picture one time of him swinging a telephone pole. 58, 169, 364. How's that first season? 48, 163, 356 was a mainstay of that Philadelphia A's team of the dynasty 29, 30, 31. And then the last on the list, and I gave him his own, Cy Young, the greatest winning pitcher of all time. And people forget this. He's the greatest losing pitcher of all time. And over 800 decisions in his lifetime. Cy Young, 15 times he won 20 games in a season. Now, totally different game. I get it. But when you're throwing 50, 60 games a year, it's impressive. Why his arm didn't suffer Tommy John surgery, I'll never know. Different circumstances, different times, I guess. But you can't deny the greatness of Cy Young. Heck, he's the only guy that they have an award named after. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History, bringing to you one of the great poems in baseball literature by Ogden Nash. Thanks for joining, and a shout out to Howard, who produces my show. Always makes it look the best. See you next week.